Good afternoon and welcome to our special coverage of the hot car death trial. I'm Vinnie Politan, and less than 24 hours ago, I was shocked, absolutely stunned at what happened inside the courtroom in Cobb County. Let's take one more look at it.
What should be reflected in decision-making is what happened in this courtroom. And this courtroom has not been a place of mild opinions. And a cold questionnaire doesn't give you the sense of what the jurors are saying, of how they are responding. The defendant has carried their burden to make a substantive showing of a likelihood that the prejudice exists because of extensive publicity, so that it would not be just to try the case in Cobb County. So I grant the defendant's motion 26 for a change of venue.
All right, it didn't shock me that there was a change of venue in this case, but what did shock me is what preceded that. 3 weeks of jury selection, 41 jurors qualified by the judge, so we were on target here. We were ready to go. If you're reading what the judge is doing, the judge is saying 41 of those jurors are okay. 36 of them were agreed to by both sides. But despite all of that, based upon what was said in the courtroom, we now have a change of venue in the hot car death case. Let me bring in my guests that I have with me here in studio. To my right, which is, I believe, your left, Darryl Cohen, great attorney, practiced all over the state of Georgia, but has done cases in Cobb County. Great to see you, Darryl.
Nice to see you. Good
Randy
to be
Kessler,
here.
who's actually a professor of law at Emory University, also a practicing attorney. Great to see you, Randy.
Good to be here.
And at the courthouse, Latonia Hines joins us, who has practiced in Cobb County and other places around the state. What happened yesterday? Can you explain to me how those jurors who were qualified after being questioned for about an hour each were suddenly unqualified to hear this case?
Well, I mean, Vinnie, here's what happened. Judge Staley, is a very thoughtful judge. And when she had that motion before her, she took some time to consider it, if you remember. And she came back at 1:30 and she told both sides. She said, you guys need to meet together. If you can come up with a consensus in this case without her having to rule, then she would have gone with that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in the way that the prosecution would have liked. And so there was no consensus. And I think Judge Staley did what she had to do. I mean, it was surprising to all of us after 3 weeks, but she did what she felt she had to do to ensure that if a conviction is found, that it doesn't get overturned. It's shocking, but at the same time, it's understood.
Well, and I understand, Darryl. I understand why the case is moved, right? What I don't understand is, I thought we had qualified jurors. Isn't that the whole voir dire process, that you bring them in, you question them, you listen to them, and then you make a decision? Either they're qualified or they're not.
I have to tell you, I said on air yesterday, I didn't think it would be moved, and today I am just as stunned as I was yesterday when I heard it. The jurors were qualified, and both sides, the defense and the prosecution, said, okay, he or she is a good potential juror. But I think when push came to shove, Judge Staley was very concerned with being overturned if there was a conviction, and that's what this is all about. It's fundamental fairness. It's a sense of justice. Is it going to be a sense of justice? We'll see.
Well, Randy, why at that point? Why isn't that something that could have been dealt with ahead of time, or maybe during the first week once the first batch came through?
Look, this is one of the arrows in the quiver of the defense, and they didn't know when to use it, and they used it apparently when it was the right time. You know, we can go through all these mental gymnastics, and second guessing is very, very easy. But as we sit here, the judge obviously thought this could be grounds for an overturned case. She does not want to try it a second time.
No, nobody wants to try it a second time. We want it done the right way.
And the defense probably, they may not have thought she was actually going to do it. That would have preserved their right to appeal and say, look, we asked the judge to move it. She never moved it. Now we got a bad verdict because the judge didn't move it. The judge should have moved it. Appeal. Well, they've now lost that right.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be no appeal. And Latonia, I'm looking at, what has happened over the last 3 weeks. Is there any sort of things that we've learned through this whole process? Is there any positive thing we can take away from what has happened in the courthouse behind you?
I mean, let me just tell you, yesterday everybody was buzzing about this. I mean, because it was something that if you've been doing this while, for 3 weeks of jury trial and jury selection, it was kind of surprising for it to happen. I mean, the positive thing about it is that it's preserved the process. I mean, if this is what the defense wanted to ensure, then they preserved the process. They can't use this later if he's indeed convicted and say that it was because he was tried here in Cobb County and the pretrial publicity, tainted everything. So I guess that's the positive about it. But for 3 weeks, this whole county, I mean, the county services, everything has prepared for this trial. So it's starting back at square one, and then the decision of where it's going to be. It's shocking. It's understood, but yet it's shocking.
As we listen to those jurors, and I heard the arguments from the defense, Darryl, but as I listened to those jurors, they seem to come into court with some preconceived notion. But that can happen in a lot of cases. And is this a case where we're not trusting jurors? Is that ultimately what we're saying? Because they said they could be fair and impartial despite their opinions. So do we not trust them?
I think we trust them, but I'm not sure that the jurors trusted themselves, and I think this is what the court is saying. Yesterday, I left the studio, and I opened my car door. It must have been 120 degrees. Every one of the same jurors had the same thing, the potential jurors. I think when we have a snapshot of a case, we're talking about a commercial, 30 seconds. Once they began to feel the gravity, once they sensed how difficult this was going to be, in my view, the Judge Staley, who's really a great judge and very thoughtful, she thought, well, this is not going to be right. This is not going the way it should go. Not prosecution, not defense, but fairness, and the jury has to be untainted as possible. But all of us have opinions. It's just the opinions had to be overcome. And maybe Judge Staley thought, this is more than we really want to have.
Well, Randy, here's the thing that I always wanted from a jury was honesty.
Right.
Right? And they were being painfully honest about having an opinion. Because, if you say you have an opinion, but then you're saying I can put it aside. So, I mean, why don't we trust them, especially ones who are so forthcoming and saying, yes, I've heard about it.
Well, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being honest. That's what we want them to do. In fact, the lawyers did a very good job in extracting that honesty. One thing that all the lawyers on your show today agree on is that we trust and we respect Judge Staley. She's a very good judge. She's been on the bench a long time, and she's sitting in a unique position. And if she sees that it's not going to be a fair trial, remember, he is innocent until proven guilty. That's the foundation of our system. And if she doesn't think they're starting the case on a platform of he's innocent until proven guilty, then she had no choice.
Latonia, did anything change? During the course of those 3 weeks, did we see a change inside the courtroom, some sort of evolution or a change in the atmosphere or the way everything was being heard? Because, I mean, the jurors are who they are, and they were being honest, and they were saying they had opinions, but they could put them aside.
No, I mean, to be quite honest, in doing jury selection, I mean, I've sat inside the courtroom during some of the process that was going on, and I didn't really see anything that was that big of a difference. I mean, they got the opportunity to do some very in-depth questions. You had some jurors, like, as in any case, that you're going to have that are going to be questionable. They're either going to give you some answers to things that make you want to question them even further. Some people that are, a little bit different that you definitely know you wouldn't want to have on a jury, but might be entertaining to the rest of the people watching jury selection. But I didn't see anything that made you feel like this was going to be the result that was going to happen.
All right, so we're part of the way there. We're going through the Ross Harris case, and we're explaining why it happened and what happened. 2 more questions, though, have to be answered when we come back. And those questions are, when is this trial going to happen? And where in Georgia are we going to go to get that fair and impartial jury? Those answers, perhaps, when we come back.
And there are a lot of things I want both sides to start thinking about. Who is going to accept us? So where are we going? It is not going to be a metro area. It can't be, because it's not like we're going to go to Macon. I don't see that as a possibility.
All right, so we know where they're not going. They're not going to Macon, but where will the hot car death trial end up? Where in the state of Georgia? It seems like the judge seemed to be leaning towards rural areas. Well, this isn't the first high-profile case that we've had here. You remember the Lynn Turner case? Lynn Turner, the one who was accused of using some antifreeze to kill her husband and her boyfriend, 2 different people. Well, her trial was moved to where? Houston County, down in Perry, from Cobb County. So that's one possibility here. Look, there's Lynn Turner. Classic beauty, right? Unbelievable. She was convicted, by the way, so she went on the road, was convicted. Latonia, let me ask you, where do you think you're going to go that's, I guess, not a metro-type area, but is a place that'll accept folks from Cobb County?
Well, listen, here's what you've got to realize, too, Vinny. And like you said, we've had a lot of cases that have moved to other counties. We had the Tokars case that ended up being in Walker County, Lafayette. We had Lynn Turner, and that case went to Houston. We had the Humphreys case most recently, which was in 2007, and that case ended up going to Brunswick, Georgia. And so here's where I'm thinking. We're probably going to end up maybe in Brunswick, because if you recall in 2013, when they had that shooting of the baby, they brought their case up here because of pretrial publicity, so they may owe us a little bit. And another thing that you also should know is that the court administrator over there is Tom Sharon. Tom Sharon was the DA here, the longest serving DA in Cobb County, and was on a lot of these high-profile cases. He and Laura Murphy, who's a part of court services, they're working very hard to make sure that the right place, that they find the right place for this, because they understand the magnitude of this type of case. So I really think we'll probably either be in some place like a Brunswick. I'm sure it'd probably be happier if we were someplace like Augusta because it's closer. But we most recently housed a Brunswick case, so that might be where we would end up.
You scratch my back, I scratch your back. All right, let me throw a couple out here to the guys here. How about Savannah, Valdosta?
Any of those places sound fine with me because of the logistics that you have to worry about. But Savannah has television. Valdosta has television, and we're going to have to keep it as low as we can. We want to make sure they're outside of the Atlanta demographics, so they don't always pick up the feed from WXIA. So people are hopefully looking at national or CNN or something else.
You got to hope they don't turn on Nancy Grace.
Or Nancy, or they don't want to use Twitter. They don't want to use Facebook.
Social media.
But there's, come on, Tifton and Albany, they got TV there, too.
Yeah. How about when? When? I mean, how quickly can this whole thing be turned around?
Well, Judge Staley's made one clear. She's going to dot her I's and cross her T's and make sure that it's a clean, good trial that's going to be hard to appeal. So it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be the next day. There are going to be a lot of logistics. Courtrooms are already booked. Calendars are planned. They've got to find a time, a place, a courthouse that's willing to take them logistically. It's going to take a few months to get started.
All right, Latonia, when do you think this whole thing could potentially happen? Because he's locked up in the meantime, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's going to take a while. And now I'm not going to say that they've already thought about this, but I'm pretty sure, knowing Tom Sharon and Laura Murphy, they have considered the idea of what if this case was moved. So I'm sure they have some places in mind, and they'll talk over it with the judge about that. I don't think you're going to get a decision within the next month or even maybe 2 months. It's going to take time, much like Randy was talking about. You've got other places that have calendars, and their calendars are going to have to be moved to other places to accommodate us.
Right, and Darryl, you talk about, this fall maybe. And if you don't get in the fall, then you're not going to be around the holidays. Then you already are into next year. I
think we're talking this year. We're going to have to avoid the Olympics, obviously, but I think we're talking this year. And
really?
Absolutely, and I don't think we're going to wait. I disagree with Latonia. I think we're going to have a decision in the next couple of weeks as to where it's going to be. And I don't think it's going to be as difficult to move other cases because Judge Staley will likely come down and she's going to preside. Now, one thing that everyone needs to understand is this case must take place in Georgia. Cannot go to Florida. Must not go to Alabama.
I know a lot of people want it out of the state, but that can't happen.
Out of mind is what we want.
All right. Well, coming up, logistics. You mentioned it, Darryl. Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to be on the road? And how about getting untainted jurors? Is that possible? We'll talk about it when we return.
What about security in a courthouse where people have not been exposed to media coverage of this case? There are courthouses in Georgia that have no security. They don't even have air conditioning. And that's true. Not many, but I know at least one exists. We are talking about the likelihood we end up in possibly a rural community with very limited amenities away from our support system.
The judge talking about the logistics of moving the hot car death trial. She's going to move it. Where, when, we don't know yet, but there's a lot of things involved with this. One thing I want to bring up is how do you protect the pool of potential jurors and where you're going to? Because if you announce to the world, Latonia, where you're going, like, hey, we're going to Brunswick, guess what the biggest story on the news in Brunswick is? In the local paper, on the local news, on the morning radio shows down in Brunswick. It's going to be this case.
Exactly. And you know what? I think that this ensures, especially since we're doing this venue change based off of the defense's motion, I think it ensures that whatever jury's picked will be sequestered. So I guess that's going to be part of what you do to try to protect them from having any knowledge of it. I mean, here's the reality. Everybody knows about this case. You're not going to stop, even in the smallest of towns, somebody knowing about the case. But maybe you have less of a chance of people already prejudging the case like you have here in Metro Atlanta and maybe a smaller rural place. But I do believe they will be sequestered.
Yeah, but protecting them before they're even selected. In the Casey Anthony case down in Central Florida, they went somewhere else to pick the jury, and the judge didn't tell anyone where they were going to pick the jury. Nobody knew until they started picking the jury. Is that what they have to do here?
I don't think they can do it here. I just don't see that happening. What I see happening here, we go to a smaller county, wherever that may be, and we try to protect the jury pool as much as we can. And once they're selected, I agree with Latonia. I'd said...
Once selected, I'm worried about...
Before?
We're talking about before they're selected,
Of course.
Randy. It's going to be a huge story once we find out where they're going.
But you know what? That's the defense's choice. They decided to object to the venue in Cobb County. They're going to have their shot with another county and another bunch of jurors, and that was the choice they made. They may regret it down the road, but who knows? We're going to see what happens. It's going to be a smaller county, and it's because there aren't any bigger counties than really Fulton or DeKalb. So it's going to be a smaller county, and people are going to know about it. You just can't get away from that. You can't get away from pretrial publicity, and sometimes it's better for jurors to know a little bit about it. So who knows how it's going to play out?
All right. Anybody here ever stay in a hotel for 2 months trying a case?
No.
That's a logistical nightmare, too.
Absolutely. The food, the hotel, the laundry, you break your eyeglasses, you lose your contacts. All of those things play a major part in it. I have food allergies. I don't have food allergies. My spouse is about to give birth. All of these things are very, very important. By the way, if we happen to try this during the summer, every single potential juror, every time he or she opens their car door that's been sitting outside, is going to get, oh, my God.
Yeah, or how about if you tried it in the courthouse that doesn't have air conditioning?
Right, well, I mean, that may play to the defense's benefit because right now we're starting off the summer just about, and we may not get to trial until fall or the winter, so that may turn out to be a lucky break.
All right. When we come back, we're going to ask the ultimate question. The change of venue. Who does it help more, the prosecution or the defense? All right, so a change of venue has been granted. The hot car death case will not be heard in Cobb County. It's going to be somewhere else. We don't know exactly where or when, but we can ask the question, who does this help more, the prosecution or the defense that asked for it? Let's begin with you, Latonia. Who is helped more by this change of venue?
I think without a doubt, even though the defense has asked for it, it helps the prosecution. Taking this to a smaller county is not going to help them find somebody who's more similarly situated to their client. You need to find somebody who also might be sitting at a desk somewhere sexting. You're not going to necessarily find somebody doing that in a smaller county, and I think that it really is going to help the prosecution. County is going to be more conservative, and at the same time, they're going to also thinking with a common sense. They're going to be looking at the main facts in this case, and I think that once they look at these facts, they're going to find a very easy way to be able to find him guilty.
All right, we got one vote for the prosecution. Darryl Cohen, is this better for the prosecution or defense?
Yesterday, the defense won what they asked for. Did they really, really want it? My answer is the defense won yesterday, but I believe the prosecution will win because there is no alternative. As rural counties, though we say we're innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond and to every reasonable doubt, reality is most people are good, really good people in rural counties, and they're going to find him guilty mentally, whether they admit it or not, prior to the trial.
2 for the prosecution. Randy, better for prosecution or defense?
Make it 3 in a row. Prosecution,
wow.
They won on 2 counts. Number 1, there's no appeal for the defense for failure to move it because of prejudice. Number 2, people get desensitized. You know, this case has been so much in the news that people might say, look, enough already. The guy left his kid in the car. Enough. I've heard it so many times. It's going to be new. And when you hear these facts the first time, they're a lot more damaging than when you hear them the 10th, 15th, 20th time. So I'd rather have a jury that's heard them a bunch. It's also harder to convict your neighbor. In Cobb County, this is someone who might live next door, someone who's similarly situated, like Latonia said. They're going to have people saying, that guy in Atlanta, people in Atlanta, they get away with stuff. They're going to treat them a little bit differently, not like a true peer.
All right. You know what? I'm going to make it unanimous here. I'm going to say the prosecution, this is better for them also. And the reason I'm saying it's better for the prosecution is I think the whole defense case is premised on attacking the police and the investigation. And I tend to think from my experience that folks in rural counties are less skeptical of police than they are in metro areas. So I think it would have been a better case for the defense in Cobb County than wherever they're going, unless it's another surprise by the judge where they end up. Big thanks to Randy Kessler and Darryl Cohen and Latonia Hines for joining us here on the program. We're going to continue to follow this case. And, of course, you can go to 11alive.com.